Hi again. It's Alison Stoll from Children's Advocacy Center. I am coming back to talk to you guys to kind of follow up about those common misbeliefs that some of us can hold about, the way children interpret violence or experience violence, and kind of gave you some myths and facts about that. So I wanted to take it a step further for everyone and say, how do we talk to kids? And how, as parents and caregivers, do you talk to your kids about domestic violence? This is important not only for parents who are in that situation, but as well as parents of children who are in that optimal environment, that good enough environment. And so their kids aren't really a direct survivor of it, but they still do get impacted by it, because in order for the statistics to make sense of 1 out of every 3 to 4 girls and 1 out of every 5 to 6 boys is experiencing some sort of abuse or violence before the age of 18, odds are they have their peers are experiencing this, and so it can be disruptive in the classroom. So we wanted to take a minute at the CAC to talk about, okay, so what do we do about it? If we know the impact of violence on brain development, if we know that there's common misconceptions about children exposed to trauma, how do we approach this? Like, it seems like such a big thing and such a scary thing to talk about. And the truth be told, the answer is in the development of tolerance. I think that within the political climate we're in, within the social climate we're in, I think we could obviously use a lot more tolerance in our daily living and everything. But specifically to children who are exposed to domestic violence, abuse early on in life, they develop certain behaviors, characteristics, habits that someone not exposed to violence will develop. And there's a reason for it. So if we can teach kids, teachers, other adults, just the general public, that, and remind them that, kids are just little people. And just like any size person, whether it's a little person or a big person, we all have our own stuff. We all have our own baggage. We all have our own issues. And so for children, the struggle is it hasn't become baggage yet because they're still in it. And so I think a lot about the author Judith Herman, Dr. Judith Herman. She wrote the book Trauma and Recovery. She talks about how to define trauma, which I think would be really helpful to talk about when we're thinking about how do you talk to your kids about domestic violence. In the previous segment where I told you guys about the myths and the facts, or the misbeliefs and the facts, I had mentioned that children in concrete operations really see the world from their point of view and have trouble taking on another point of view. In psychology, it's the fancy term of that is theory of mind. But when you think about a kid who is really seeing the world from their own view, so they're very egocentric, so they're self-focused, which is developmentally appropriate. Judith Herman talks about trauma, the definition of trauma being an event that happens, either acute or chronic, so either just one event or ongoing, that essentially shatters a person's belief that the world is a good and safe place. So if you're talking to your kids about domestic violence, what does it look like? How do we build tolerance for those of the peers or classmates that maybe have experienced that or now are starting to have behavioral issues? Is think about what Dr. Judith Herman is saying in that statement. And then ask your child, okay, hey, do you see the world as a generally good and safe place, or do you see it differently? And whatever the answer will be. Hopefully it's that they see the world as a generally good and safe place. But then ask them, what do you think you would do, or how would you respond if you felt like the world was not a safe place? It was dangerous. That when you would go home, it wouldn't feel safe. And really ask your kids about how they would feel. because you're encouraging, first of all, they'll be able to see it from their point of view. So you're not asking them to like say like a what if. You're really saying, okay, for you, how do you feel and how do you behave when you don't feel safe, if you're scared? To kind of give them a glimpse into why children who've been exposed to domestic violence, trauma, abuse, neglect, come up with certain behaviors that maybe otherwise wouldn't be there. It really comes back to that statement by Judith Herman, is that a kid who's exposed to domestic violence, abuse, neglect early on develops very quickly the basic idea that the world is not a generally good and safe place. Adults are not generally good and safe people. And on top of that, that egocentric way of thinking about things, and also only being able to see it from their point of view, it gives children the misbelief or misconception that they actually have more control over how safe or dangerous something is. You'll hear it a lot. I hear it a lot as a therapist of like, it was my fault. I participated. I should have known better. I shouldn't have broken this, or I shouldn't have said it this way. And really, all of those statements or all of those ways of making meaning about what they've experienced are revolving around this idea that the world isn't safe. That's the given. And there are certain things that I can do to either make it more safe or less safe. And so when it became less safe, it's because I made this set of decisions. If it was more safe, it's because I made these set of decisions. When the reality of it is that actually it doesn't matter what the child does. When you're in a situation of domestic violence, abuse, neglect, or whatever, those situations happen to the child. They're not a statement about the child. And so that's where CAC really comes in, Safe from the Start really comes in. Their therapy programs is to try to unpack that with children about, yes, something bad happened to you, but you aren't bad, which gets really convoluted and kind of messed up when the kids go to school and they're stuck thinking and reacting to school and all the demands of school and classmates and teachers as if they're dangerous. I mean, even take a moment to think about for yourself. How do I respond when I feel like I'm in danger? I can say I personally probably am not the nicest person when I feel that frightened and then I feel in danger. And I'm not really thinking or concerned about whatever my actions are and the, you know, how it'll impact the person around me, because at the end of the day, you know, we all have that survival mode of our stress response that makes us want to survive to see the next day. So if I feel that threatened, it doesn't really matter to me what other people are thinking, feeling, or how I'm impacting them, because I need to get through today so I can see tomorrow, which is how you see a lot of those children labeled, quote unquote, like the bad kid. Or there's like, I'm sure as adults, we can go back and remember there was always one kid who seemed to kind of not be able to get into the swing of things. And odds are, to make the statistics make sense, is that that kid was struggling to regulate and really adjust to the demands of school and the demands of, you know, social interaction, because at home, it's not safe. At home, they're experiencing violence. At home, they've been exposed to this from a young age, which then makes them approach the world as if it's dangerous and everything's a threat. So don't be afraid to talk to your children in that way about, hey, like this may be what's going on with the bully at school, or this may be going on with that weird bad kid in your class. Is that, you know, having these open conversations about it, allowing your children to ask you questions, really does build that tolerance. I mean, how would we build tolerance for any other subject? Is to have those conversations and figure out how to navigate and develop some empathy for the person going through it. Why is that important? Why, you know, not only to have a well-rounded child who's got tolerance and empathy for others, is that as a parent or as an adult, and your child in the school system, children who've experienced domestic violence and abuse and neglect, they do have behavioral issues, again, because of the world not being a generally good and safe place. But they do that need to be addressed by the school and potentially take away, that interface and learning time that your child would have with your teacher, because your teacher needs to address those issues. While we don't want the teacher not to address those issues, we want you to be aware that, okay, you can say that domestic violence is not happening in my household. It still impacts you. It still impacts your children. It impacts your children's friends. It impacts your friends in general. You don't know what baggage they come with either. And so to really kind of shine a light on this and really talk about it, because the statistics are incredible. If you are in a room with 4 women, it's most likely that at least one, if not 2 of those women have experienced abuse from the age of birth to 18. And so to start having a conversation about this and shining a light into that darkness, especially with your kids, who kids are extremely empathic, extremely resilient. And also once you kind of give them an explanation, they're like, oh, okay. And then it's like they can assimilate that into how they see the world and how they grow as people, I think is really important. Again, it's one of those reasons that the CAC has the Safe from the Start program, is to really help develop those skills from an early age with individuals who've experienced the domestic violence as well as the caregiver, to help build that tolerance and understanding.